Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the personal development podcast for the seven-figure entrepreneur who's looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. Joining me as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday.
It is indeed a happy Monday. It's going to be a really interesting Monday because if you're looking to level up your marketing, this is the episode for you. But you have to ask yourself an honest question, right? Sometimes you just have to look in the mirror and just keep it real with yourself. The question is, does your marketing suck? That's the question you have to ask yourself, right? And just be honest. Does my marketing suck? And we've got three questions that are going to come out of this episode to really help you to assess where you are, because things can change for the better instantly. And hopefully you'll log off of this podcast and make the changes. Or maybe your marketing doesn't suck. Maybe it's pretty good. Maybe you're just going from good to great or great to the next level. Either way, you can benefit from this. So you definitely want to tune in because we definitely have someone who can help you. This is what he does. He is all about media and marketing and getting you to become a celebrity in your niche, which is what we'll talk about. All right, let's get to it, Ted.
Let's get to it. Let's go. Let's go.
I'm trying to figure what was Ted doing today.
I mean, let's go. Let's go.
All right. I'm fired up now. Okay.
Let's go.
So our guest today, he's the founder of Blue16 Media, CBNation, and BlueStar Franchise. So Blue16 Media, they use media and technology to change lives. These media properties include Blue16 Marketing, a digital marketing agency providing digital marketing services that include web design, web support, and SEO services. CBN consists of media properties, blogs, podcasts, and videos, helping the business community to succeed. And BlueStar Franchise helps connect first-time and seasoned entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners with their ideal franchise. So with all that, he's also the host of the I Am CEO podcast. And Ted, check this out. He's done over 1,600 episodes.
What? 1,600.
1,600 episodes. We got to figure out how he's doing that. But that's an amazing feat. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-minute hour, Gresham, Harkless Jr.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Eric and Ted.
Just like the motion for the day.
There you go.
Get a running start.
Get there.
Let's go. Let's go.
So like if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, you have no idea why we're laughing right now.
Just go with it. Just go.
Right, just go with it. Go with it, and then go to YouTube or go to Facebook, or go to LinkedIn, and you can actually see exactly what we're doing. But yeah, there we go. So yeah, Gresham, welcome. Yeah, I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I definitely wanted to acknowledge you just for just being a media boss and just really owning this thing and just I've listened to several of your different podcasts in different places as far as when you've been interviewed. And you definitely have some consistent content. So I definitely wanted to acknowledge you for that and give you a shout out. Now, here's the thing. I found out something interesting. Your media business actually started when you were 10 years old. That's what a little birdie told me, Gresham. So can you tell me about that? Tell me about your experience as a 10-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited to be here, Eric and Ted, and yeah, a lot of what I started, that seed was planted when I was 10 years old. I was the kid that sold potato chips on the playground, did things like got my parents, I call them venture capitalists at the time, to take me to MJ Designs to get beads to create and sell necklaces on the playground, things like that. But I think the thing that stood out to me more than anything else is I started a family newspaper when I was 10. My dad was in the military. He got reassigned to go to UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, for a year. And he went when I was younger, but that time kind of stuck out to me more because like he had a better, bigger impact in my life, because that was like my big brother essentially, and is still to this day. But we didn't have all these snazzy tools that we have now to instantly connect with people, like FaceTime and StreamYard and Zoom and all those things. So I created a family newspaper at that time. We would put that in a care package that we used to send to him monthly. I would talk about all the things in the newspaper, what was going on in our family, from a squirrel that got into my grandma's house to anything that was going on. My cousin was born. I had him on the front page at the time. So a lot of things that were going on in our family. So we would send that over to him, keep him updated on the things that were happening. But in entrepreneurial form, I also sold the subscriptions. So a lot of times I say that was that seed that was planted when I was a lot younger, and something that I kind of always go back to kind of figure out, like, what would 10-year-old Gresh do in this situation? Because I feel like that was the essence of who I am.
I mean, most 10-year-olds aren't thinking about that. They're not thinking on that level. I mean, what what motivated you to be thinking in terms of media? I mean, just at that young age.
Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I said that I knew that I was building a media. I think it's me looking backwards to say, hey, maybe that was the seeds that we're planting. I just love to write. I love creativity. I mean, I was me literally getting on a computer, Microsoft Word, adding clip art in, just kind of like discovering different things. And I've always been that person that liked to do things like that. And I can't say that I knew that it was a media company. I just knew I always wanted to write. That's one of the reasons I ended up becoming an English major years later, is because I love just like the creation of what we now call content. But for me, it was just like being who I was and just writing. So I always love to kind of explore the different, ways that you can do that to communicate. But now I know, and I can call it a media company. And why I joke and say that was my first media brand, but I had no idea of it then.
So let me ask this question. So the newspaper that you sold was your family paper.
Mostly. So I started to experiment. So I started to cover things like Black History. I would have Black History
Okay.
there, sports. There was like NBA Finals games. Like you can get the update to that. So I read a lot. I was always a big reader, and I used to read the newspaper myself just to kind of figure out. So I said, hey, they're doing this. My mom used to watch, soap operas. So she get the soap opera digest. So I would put some of that in there. So lots of
Okay.
different things. So, but the thing that made it unique, I think, was covering whatever was going on in our family. I joke and say like I was like the TMZ for our family.
That's funny. Cool.
That's awesome. So then you go on, you go to Howard University. So and, I'm not going to mention, Hampton and Howard played over the weekend, and we're not going to talk about what the score is because that's not the theme of the show. We're just going to keep it moving, right?
Lost the
Yeah.
game. We might have won the party though.
Yes, I can agree with that. Okay. Yeah. But when you were at Howard, I'm sorry. What was your vision? Were you thinking that, yep, I'm definitely going to do this media thing? What were your plans at that point?
Yeah, so I literally I came in as undecided, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I felt like I college actually snuck up on me. I felt like it came a lot sooner than I was expecting it. Both of my parents ended up, getting their degrees, but they didn't necessarily go to college. So just going to college was a new experience of like, taking care of the SAT and doing those things, like applying, just all that was new. So when I came in, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be very honest. I thought that I wanted to do something with computers. Like I took AP computer science class when I was in college. I mean, in high school. But I went back to that story. So a lot of like that 10-year-old, I felt like I don't know what I want to do necessarily. I have different ideas, whether, I was thinking of being an attorney, going to law school. So all those things kind of flesh through. So I tried to like play to my strengths of like what made me light up, what I enjoyed doing, and hopefully give myself a little bit more flexibility. And I felt like me eventually becoming an English major, I think officially it was my sophomore year at Howard. That's where I said, okay, I want to lean more into this, but I still said that, okay, I could still go to law school. I ended up getting my master's later on, so I could still do many things, but I know I love writing. So I wanted to do journalism, honestly, but I said that that industry was kind of being ravaged. So I said, let me be a little bit more of an English major, and then I could always, use writing and communication, hopefully in the future.
Okay. So you go on to become this media mogul. So one of the things that you say, like your central marketing philosophy, you talk about how you are a media company, and every company is in the media business. Let's talk about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so fast forward a lot of years, like I mentioned, I was really looking into journalism. So I looked at a lot of the media brands per se, and they didn't really have a solid business model. So I always knew that I wanted to write. I thought I would do I ended up doing a lot of freelance writing and things like that. What I started to see, usually like really around the time that I graduated, is that there was a lot of people that could write well, they can communicate well, but they didn't necessarily have a viable place to do that, even job wise, because the newspapers, magazines, just everything was being destroyed. So what a lot of people end up doing is going in a little bit more into that business place. They did a lot of content creation and things like that. So for me, that's where a lot of those seeds were planted around being a media company. I just consider media to, at the very essence, be the way that you transfer information from one person to another. And if we look at it on a very, granular level, that could be done in many different ways. We have social media, we have your website, even us having this conversation is a form of media. Handing your business card out is a form of media. So I really started to look at like everyone in some form, shape, or fashion is in the media business, especially for organizations and businesses, because at the heart of it, whenever you start a business, one of the first things they say is literally tell as many people as you can that you're in business and this is what you do. So when I started to like look at it from that perspective, I started to see that there's a lot of different ways that we can leverage media to get our name, information, what we do, how we do it out and about to the world and to the people that we ultimately want to serve. So that's where a lot of that came about. It was at the heart of it, of like that journalistic mindset. But at the end of the day, it was like there's emerging opportunities to be able to get your name out there more than there ever has been. And that's kind of like where everything kind of took hold.
No, that's great, and I'm just curious too. I mean, you've got all of these different media properties. Help us to get an understanding of kind of what your thought process was from starting it, what they do. Like, I mean, for example, let's start with you've got Blue16 Media. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I started out with Blue16 Media, which it eventually was that digital marketing company. It comes into more of a overlay brand of everything that we're doing. Because at the heart of it, what we're trying to do is use media and technology to change lives. That's the essence of what we're trying to do to make that impact. And there's different segments that we try to do that for. When I initially started Blue16 Media, I was going into figuring out how to set up people's websites, how to help out with SEO and things along that lines. What I realized is that in order to connect and serve the audience that I ultimately wanted to serve, I was doing freelance writing on the side. I had a entrepreneur spotlight column, and that eventually became what is now CBNation. So it eventually became a blog. I used to interview a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, find out why they started their business. So when I was thinking of like, how do I differentiate Blue16 Media, not just be another digital marketing company, I was looking on the other hand and I said, okay, like I have something that can actually serve the people that I want to work with. So it was a sense of like starting to merge those two brands together because they serve the same audience in different ways. One was about amplifying the people that were, I call superheroes, the entrepreneurs, business owners doing awesome things. And on the other end, it was like, okay, maybe they will need website support services. Maybe they will need SEO services. Maybe they don't know anything about like what's happening in the digital marketing world. And this was 10 to 11 years ago. So it wasn't nearly as robust as it is now. But still, it's just like bringing those two things together to say, okay, maybe some of the people I'm interviewing, I'm talking to, having these conversations with might have their website that's broken, or maybe they want to leverage SEO a little bit more. And that's where those two kind of worlds kind of started to collide and combine.
Okay. And then you got so we get to BlueStar Franchises, where you're helping seasoned entrepreneurs and CEOs connect with their ideal franchise. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so that's a fairly new initiative that I've been kind of working through. And the idea is that within business, like I've always been interested in business entrepreneurship, like I mentioned, and like a lot of what I've learned is by talking with really phenomenal people that have started things. And I started to realize like underneath entrepreneurship, there's really different aspects that you can go into entrepreneurship. And one of those is being franchise. That's basically you going in and having what is more of a ready-made system. So it's not necessarily the case for everybody that they want to necessarily do that, but it's another opportunity that people can, start to develop generational wealth. They can start to develop an opportunity to generate revenue in a different way. So it's just deepening my understanding of entrepreneurship in different ways that people can serve there, and kind of having more knowledge in ways that we can kind of help support them there. So that's just another way that we kind of help support people that might be interested in franchising, may not even know what it is, or that it's more than a McDonald's, a Chick-fil-A, and those avenues, that there's so much that's there that people can kind of tap into so that they can reach their ultimate goals.
Okay. All right. And so Gresham, now, I mean, there's somebody that's listening to us or watching us, and they're saying, you know what? My marketing isn't where I want it to be. Right. I don't know, should I be doing TikTok? Should I be on LinkedIn? Should I be on Facebook? I keep hearing everybody starting a podcast. That's the latest thing. Should I start a podcast? Wait, so my feeling is that your three questions, the whole point, if you can really answer these three questions, it helps steer the person in the right way as far as, hey, should I start a MySpace account? What do I do here? My marketing sucks. I need help. All right, Gresham, what are those three questions that people need to be asking?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're starting a MySpace account, then your marketing will probably definitely suck. So you want to start there. Don't
That's
necessarily do
takeaway.
it.
That's my takeaway.
That's your
Don't start a
takeaway.
MySpace
If you
account.
don't
There
know
you go.
anything, you take away that. A lot of the times I compare your digital marketing, the way you should approach it, to like going to the grocery store to figure out what your favorite dish is. My favorite dish is always my mom's sweet potato pie. So I say, like, if you go to the grocery store, you're trying to figure out what ingredients are you going to put into that ultimate thing that you want to create. So as a business organization, what are you trying to achieve? What does success look like? So those three questions essentially revolve around your resources. Resources, most people think about it's money, like how much money am I going to spend? And it does include that, but it also includes time. So how are you spending your time if you're going to DIY it, if you're going to bootstrap it and do it yourself? What are going to be those resources you have available? Typically, when people are starting, they have more time than they have money. And as they start to reach some success, they're able to reinvest some of that money into buying more time, essentially. So it's just like being clear on like where you are on the scale, kind of related to that. The other big thing is to understand who you're serving. This is your ideal client. A lot of times in the marketing world, you'll hear the word avatar. Essentially, what you want to do is paint a picture as much as possible of who you ultimately want to serve. When I say that, I mean literally age, location, their pain point. So you really want to get into that psychological aspect of like, especially if you have a product or service. Like, I think most of the time around entrepreneurship, we forget that we are ultimately problem solving. So what problem are you solving for the clients that you're working with? And I think that you want to be able to communicate that as much as possible, but you want to make sure that you are making that known and you are even aware of that. There's a lot of investment that people make into market research, and the reason is because you're trying to understand as much as you can about the clients that you're ultimately trying to serve. So the more you learn, the more experience and expertise, the more you're talking with them and engaging, it's just going to help you out as far as like knowing this is ultimately who we serve. This is the age. They have 2.5 dogs, 3.5 kids, whatever that might be. They love sports. They're a huge Cowboys fan, whatever that might be, is going to be your answer. And then you're going to kind of work backwards from there. And then one of the things that I've learned, especially from, my podcast, is like, most people don't have the same definition of success. So the last question you really want to answer is, what does success mean to you? Why are you doing this business? What does that look like? For some people, they're doing marketing initiatives because they just wrote a book and they want to get speaking engagements. That's going to be completely different from somebody that starts an e-commerce site and wants to have people go to their site, click, buy, and not even talk with them. So you have to really understand exactly like what success is, because those three foundational questions are really going to help you before you jump into TikTok or MySpace or whatever that might be that you decide. You're going to have a solid foundation to filter through those quote unquote ingredients, as I like to call them, so that you can have a strong and effective marketing strategy.
You know, it's really interesting that today, just how different things are than say 20 years ago, right? I mean, if you look out and you see people, man, on, you know, on social media, and they're, whatever that product is they're selling, or service or whatever, and how they're able to reach so many potential, you know, customers with little to nothing as far as an investment, right? Like, it used to be a time that you're like, okay, I need this marketing budget because I want to try to get some commercials on television, or some radio spots, or some banners on the side of buses and at bus stops. And now, you know, a person's just going out there on social media, and, you know, they opened up a restaurant and they just have pictures of their food out there, right? And, you know, and they're going live at their restaurant, right? And they got, you know, 50,000 followers. It's, you know, it's interesting. I was watching this one young lady, and all she does is go to different restaurants and eat, and just videotapes herself eating. She's giving her own, you know, assessment of the food, and she's probably got, you know, 50,000 followers. She's no expert in this, but it's kind of like, you know, she's building, you know, this following by just using this using Instagram as a platform to kind of to pretty much market herself as, I guess, as an expert.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal time. It's so funny. Like, one of my first jobs that I had out of school after I graduated was at the Yellow Book, and they had they rebranded to Haibu at the time because I think they wanted to be more of that. But I remember talking to the older reps, and a lot of the times they said that you would get a Yellow Book ad, literally get that front page ad, and you would put your kids through college from that. That's all you had to do. And it kind of, it's changed so much, because now I'm going to use the word decentralized. You hear that a lot in different places, but that's what's happening a lot, where now you're being able to go direct to consumer, and you're able to build that connection relationship. You're getting to see like what that journey looks like, and trying those different foods. Those foods weren't good. I love your personality, so I want to connect with you. So it's there's a tremendous opportunity if you are able to, if you're willing to try to start to tell those stories and use these platforms. But two, you have to be, I think, very aware of like what that journey looks like, because I think so many times we think when we're looking at these ingredients, these ways that we can get our name out there, that we have to check off all the boxes and do all the things. It's usually the rawness, the unfilteredness, that actually is the opportunity to connect. It's the failures, the things we don't honestly want to share, that actually connects us more, and it kind of develops those relationships where they're just amplified with all the things that we're doing.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I do think that people like the rawness, and they like something that they feel like they can touch and understand, you know. So yeah, very good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we're talking about media and marketing, something I'm curious about, kind of along the lines of what Ted's talking about, like just another guy who, like right after the pandemic, he starts this TikTok thing where he goes to different restaurants and he reviews the restaurants, gives his opinion. He's got 1 million followers now. And, you know, whenever he goes to a particular restaurant, that restaurant's business goes up 400%, and he's making all his money different ways. So what are your thoughts? What advice do you have for that business owner who's looking to go viral? You know, he's asked himself 3 questions, so he's on a better path. But now he or she wants to go viral. What advice do you have for that person?
Or that person that want to make a lot of money just eating. Like that's what it sounds like these folks are doing. Like I'm eating, but I ain't making money eating. How do you make money eating?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to those three questions on either side, is being able to kind of answer those. But what I would say, like I'm real big into like building your own media company. So like you go eat, you consistently, like what a lot of times people don't realize is those people that do go viral, you start to like, you look at somebody like Mr. Beast, for example. If you start to read and understand like the amount of time he put into creating these YouTube videos to be successful, you'll realize it's not usually just eating. There's so much behind the scenes, especially around content creation. And it's increasing more and more and more that the things that you need to do, because it's more competitive. So the more competitive it's going to be, the more that you're going to have to do. So there's so much that's behind that. But one of the things I would say is that if you start to look at these influencers as media brands in and of itself, you start to realize that, one, I always say, build your own media company. So if you're willing to put in the time, again, going back to those resources, you're going to put in the time to figure out what's going to resonate with my audience. You're looking at the data, the analytics to see what's working. You're also studying what and why people are successful. There's a whole kind of data analysis that you can do related to that to really understand like what is going to increase your likelihood of success, not guarantee, but increase your likelihood of going viral. But I would say for those brands and those organizations, the businesses that want to, or maybe they don't want to make that investment, I always say the next best thing is to participate on somebody else's media brand. So that's where you see these micro influencers, where you do have that person that did go viral and has 1 million followers. Rather than you build that out, if you realize that you don't want to do that, maybe you are creating some type of ad and you're paying them to be able to tap into their audience, because their audience connects with yours. So it's really to be able to think strategically around, hey, I want to build a media brand. This is the resources I'm willing to commit. This is the time I'm willing to commit. Or like, I don't really want to do that. So let me tap into these micro influencers, be on different podcasts, contribute on different blogs. There's so many different ways you can do that if you really know your audience. If you know your audience likes sweet potato pie, you're going to try to find every sweet potato pie restaurant, blogger, podcast, so that you can be there. So it's just really understanding that target audience so that you can try to be there and hopefully do that on a kind of more grassroots level.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think too, what we don't see, we see, they got the 1 million followers, but we don't see all of that. They've been literally posting every day for like 3 years, and we don't see the videos. They got like 3 views,
Right.
but they just kept going. We see the end result.
What's funny is, I was talking about that one person that's always eating, right? And now, I find myself when she goes live, sometimes I'm just clicking to see what she's doing, right? Now, this is between the three of us, right? So
I won't
keep
tell
this to
anybody.
yourself.
You
Don't tell anyone. But the other day, I found myself just watching her as she was talking to her friends and was like combing and wrapping her hair. I'm sitting there thinking, why am I sitting here watching this? Right? Like, and people are, just doing ordinary stuff. I'm like I don't have something else I could be doing with my time. Or why am I not going live so people can just see me at the house shuffling papers or something? So it was just, but it was the strangest thing. So again, keep that between us, please.
Absolutely. Secret safe with me.
For sure. All right. Now, this is good stuff. So again, we talked about the 3 questions, and we said, just to kind of recap those of you that may just be joining us, you need to know what success looks like for you. You need to be able to define that. You need to know who you're serving, who's your target audience, who's your avatar. I think that is huge. I think that's where a lot of people kind of go astray. Then the other one is like time versus money. How are you going to fund it? Are you going to bootstrap it? What are you going to do there? But those are 3 critical questions to ask. So Gresham, thank you for sharing that, because I think you really help people to get their marketing in a better place just by thinking about that. Now, I want to talk about this podcast. So this is the I Am CEO podcast, and you've done over 1,600 episodes. Man, so let's unpack this. So
I feel like such a slacker. Like what have we been doing with our X amount of episodes? Man.
we're at number 353. So, but man, 1600. I mean that's awesome. I mean, how long you been doing the show? Like, what's your schedule like?
Yeah, so for the podcast, yeah, I definitely got it down to a system. So I had a little behind the scenes is when I used to do a lot of the freelance writing, I used to record all the interviews. I would take those recordings, and those became my first podcast interviews. When I heard about podcasts, this was like maybe 7 to 8 years ago. So I had a podcast called the CEO Chat Podcast, and I had it. Eventually, I got it up to weekly, but it was just really just, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And then I would have these interviews. So at some point, I said, I really love this medium. I think it's phenomenal. You get to have great conversations, meet great people. So I started to kind of like brainstorm, how would I make this into something that was a little bit more scalable? And what I eventually came out with was the I Am CEO podcast. And I really wanted to have like a set standard system of like questions that I would ask. So I took some of the best questions I would ask on the CEO Chat podcast, which was a longer form podcast, definitely not as organized, not as a lot more conversational might be the best way to put it. So that's where the podcast came about. So I've been doing that podcast for probably about 6 or 7 years, I think. And I had it down to like a system. I've been a lot more, I've done a lot more solo episodes lately, but I really got it down to like 6 set questions I would ask. I really set it out to make sure that I have set questions, but I wanted the questions to overlap so that it would stay very conversational. Because that was the thing I didn't want it to be, is like very robotic. I was like, okay, here's question one, here's question two. I didn't want it to be that. So I wanted to make sure that the guests that were on the show would be able to understand, these are the questions. This is the flow that I want to have for the show. But at the same time, people that were listening would still be able to say, okay, I know every episode I'm going to get a hack, I'm going to get a nugget, I'm going to hear a story, just that expectation of what's going to happen. So for me, like when I was doing it at its peak, I was doing upwards of like maybe 13 recordings. I would have them back to back, 30-minute block of time. And I would be like a madman. Now I've tightened, loosened the reins a little bit. So I have like an hour block of time. We shoot for about a 30-minute conversation. And I also do like solo podcasts and things like that. But upwards, I was doing like upwards of like 13. I would have them on Monday afternoon, most of the day, Friday. It would be during my office hours. And yeah, I just had it down to a system, and I was just, go, 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 go. Not sure where this is going to go, but I know it's going to align with everything that I'm hoping to do.
Oh, that's great. I mean, and so what are the main thing when people, when they aren't listening to the 30-minute hour and they tune into the I Am CEO podcast, what are some big things that they're going to take away from listening to this?
Yeah, there's so much things that I've learned from being on the show. I started to like distill down them into themes, and then also into like pillars, business pillars that we all kind of pay attention to, but we may not be aware of. I would say if there's one big thing, and I can of course go on and on and on, but I would say the biggest thing that I've heard consistently is just like the morning routines. I call it the quote unquote star time, because I named it after my dog who passed away recently. But I call it Star
Sorry for
Time
your
just
loss.
because. Thank you, thank you. It's the way that you set up your day. A lot of times for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners, and frankly, just people in general, we're so busy. There's so many things that we have to juggle. We're constantly putting out fires that in order to kind of have a great start to the day, sometimes you do it early. And that early does not have to mean, cold plunge, showers, or anything like that. It can literally just be 5 to 10 minutes that you're getting up a little bit earlier, or you're starting your day with a little bit more intentionality. And that can set up your day to be better. So one of the cool things that I've heard, on the show is that there's not necessarily one way to have a morning routine, one way to have your start time. You can do it in a lot of different ways. So I think that's one of the most powerful things, but there's so much, value that I've learned, from people, that have been on the show. But that's probably one of the big things that I've heard consistently over and over again, that people have some type of intentionality with what they're doing in the morning.
It's funny you say that because Ted and I found the same thing, even just in the 353 or so episodes we've done. Like, whenever we talk to somebody who's really successful, it's not like they're like, oh, I lie on the couch, eat a bag of potato chips, and then I get my day started. It's
Yeah, no.
it's always a routine, and I can say from our standpoint, the ultra high performing people, they seem to have mentors. They always mention how mentors is really what got them to where they are in every case. And now they may be at a point now where they're really focused on mentoring other people. But so we're talking about podcasting. So if there's somebody watching or listening to us and they're on the fence about starting a podcast, what are some good reasons that you see that the business people watching and listening should be starting a podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to go right back to those three questions. Make sure you answer those three questions.
There
That
you
third
go.
question, your why. What are you trying to accomplish? For me, doing a daily podcast was a way that I can leverage opportunity to network. I used to network a lot. I was out and about at lots of different events and I was burning out. So this podcast was a way for me to network in a different way. I got to connect with people in a unique way to be able to make that happen. So as a business leader, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, ask yourself those questions. What are you ultimately trying to accomplish? Now, one of the best ways I think that people can leverage podcasts is if you have some type of thought leadership, if you're an expert in your field, if you've accomplished something that other people don't know about, that is going to be the best way. That's probably going to lead you to doing more solo podcasts where you're talking about you're providing knowledge and information to help people to level up in whatever it is your zone of genius or your expertise. So I think especially for people like most of the people when they think of podcasting, they're thinking of like, how can I get advertisers? And don't get me wrong, don't get me wrong. There's definitely a place for that, but I think for those that have a business, have a way to generate revenue, a solid business model, and are using this to amplify, using it actually as a marketing strategy, that's one of the best ways that you can really leverage that. So think about it, what is my expertise, especially if you're in like a very complex or it seems to be complex industry where it becomes difficult to kind of communicate what exactly you do and how you do it and why you do it, to kind of I don't want to say dumb it down, but communicate it like you're talking to a 4-year-old, whatever that might be, then that's going to be a great avenue for you to do that. And you get to save time because rather than going through and answering every client's questions that you get over and over again, you can send them a link to the podcast. Hey, I heard that so many times. I created this podcast just for you because I knew that you were going to ask that question. But I think one of the second maybe most underutilized ways to use podcasting is what I kind of alluded to is networking. If you really think about maybe you're bringing in potential clients. There's a lot of people, even I've had people on the show that do podcast editing or podcast production. So they have it as part of their overall flow and the core of their business. But also think of your referral partners. And referral partners are the people that are having the same conversation that you're having, but they provide a different product or service. So when they're doing that, they're not necessarily competing with you. They're having the same conversations. They're meeting with the people that you want to meet with. Have them on the show. You have a back and forth. You talk about it, whatever the topic might be from different perspectives, and you've just developed and deepened the relationship that you've had. So also look at the podcast as a way to provide more value for your clients, because you can also give them this episode with a different perspective, them thinking about accounting when you are an IT professional. Maybe they never thought about both of those two things together, but maybe you have somebody on the show that does that. So it's really thinking strategically on how it can amplify your business. But I think that most of the time with podcasting, like if you really listen to my first podcast, I don't want to call them garbage, but they're just not the best.
It was your first podcast.
It's my first time. Yeah, actually, I was going to go to bartending school. And one of the things I learned at bartending school was that if anybody says you didn't do a good job, just say it's my first day. So I say that for my podcast. You go back and listen to those. Those are my first day. So, have grace on me. But, really look at it, from that perspective of just getting it out there, just having those conversations. You can always improve it. It could always be your first day, your first podcast. You're always going to get better. And I think that's one of the biggest things is don't don't feel like it has to be perfect. Don't feel like you have to get to a certain number. Just be open to doing it consistently. Understand that you're trying to serve your audience, and then just kind of go from there.
No, great. That's great. And it was one of the things for me is like, I'm still amazed that some of the people were able to get an hour of their time. I mean, if there was no podcasting, there's no way without us really paying that. Like, for example, like if you go back, we had episode number 299, we had Dr. Terry Levine on, and we're asking her about all the things she's done to be successful and what are her tips. And now, like, keep in mind, she has like sold 8 businesses for started and sold 8 businesses at multi-million-dollar level. She charges $25,000 an hour for you to meet with her. So if you just say, hey, I want to know what you did to be successful, that's $25,000. And because of this thing called the podcast, we get to share her expertise. I'm just amazed at just the opportunities that are there. So hopefully everybody is considering that. Now, I did want to shift gears a little bit. And you said something on a show on one of your podcast episodes. If you run your own race, you can't lose. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think so many times when, whether we're talking about marketing or we're talking about the reason that you even created a business, we're so often looking at everybody else's lane to figure out how we should run our race. And I think that one of the most challenging things that you can do, sometimes it requires you to create space and you to answer questions for yourself personally, but even for your organization. Like, what is on a show, I call it the secret sauce, the unique selling proposition, the differentiator, what's going to set you apart, make you unique. But I think that you don't truly get that from somebody else. It's the same reason, like, I didn't know what I was going to be, what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I took time and space and said, okay, this 10-year-old Gresh did something that's unique. So maybe there's some type of seed that's planted there. I think when you start to lean into what that is and who you are and how you want to show up in the world, what impact you ultimately want to make, you're going to understand that this is who you are and this is how you can show up. And that ends up being your race. I think so many times, especially on socials, we'll see that people are successful because of A, B, and C, or X, Y, and Z, and we want to emulate that and copy that. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely time and space to be able to, to borrow from other people to kind of emulate that, but you want to make it into your own. I think so many times we're not leaning into who we are and what makes us unique and what makes us special. And so running your own race is essentially that. It's just like, hey, this is who I am. This is how I want to operate and impact the world. And this is what is going to make, that, unique. And a lot of times you can have the exact same business as somebody else, but you run your race in a different way. You serve different clients. You look for different clients. You have different messaging. You're on different podcasts. Whatever that might be is a different way for you to show up. So it's just important for you to first and foremost know your race. And secondly, like, understand that running it is a big part of it, and it's not always as glamorous as it might seem, but it's something I think everybody should do.
Now, I think that's a key point. You really want to, because it's easy to get, again, you go back to that person who's 14, they've got 5 million followers, and it's easy to get off track, but you, like I said, you got to really be focused, stick to the questions, and put in your work. So, I know you get asked a lot of questions, but I just want to know, like what's a question that you never get asked that you wish Ted and I would have asked you today?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't even know what that would be. I feel like I've been asked so many different questions. Yeah, I don't know yet. I can come up with one that I know right now. That's a good question. What question have I not been asked? Yeah, I can't come up with anything right now. Yeah, you stumped me.
Well, that seems to be a question that you've never been asked.
I haven't been asked that.
This is the question you never been asked. There you go.
That's it.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
You can come back on that.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Yeah.
No pressure. We'll come back to you about 20 seconds.
Okay.
Good joke.
All right. Good stuff. So we're down to the final segment. It's write this down. And Ted, this is his favorite part of the show. Yeah, this is where
it really is in Gresham. I can't stand this part of the show.
it's where we each go around and give at least one takeaway from today's episode that the people need to write down so they can level up. So Gresham, you're the guest of honor. What do the people need to write down from today's episode?
Yeah, I kind of didn't touch on it exactly, but I kind of alluded to it. One of my favorite quotes is, "Don't tell me the sky is the limit when there's footprints on the moon." And I touched on it a little bit with the podcast because I think a lot of times we think that we need to have all the things in place, and we don't take those steps. We don't even try to get things going. But I think there's so many kind of naysayers, people that say that you can't do things, or doubters or haters, whatever you might call them, that sometimes there's things that we're working on right now. Literally us like having this conversation right now is somebody that had an idea and brought it to fruition. And somebody I'm sure said that that's not going to happen. That's not possible. So I think my biggest thing would be like, whether it's a podcast, whether you're marketing your business, or whether you're even starting a business, don't let people tell you that the sky is the limit, because there's definitely footprints on the moon.
Yeah, I think that's a twiggable quote.
Yeah, it's definitely twiggable.
Yeah, don't tell me the sky is the limit when there are footprints on the moon. Write that down for sure.
That's why I don't like this part of the show, because now I got to follow something like that. Like that was really good. I think from just hearing everything, I think when it comes to marketing, I think now we're at a place now where it's like don't overthink it, right? Like I think about how Eric and I started with the podcast, right? Like we were always saying we want to do something together. We need to do something. We got to do something, right? And I guess if you go from experience and education and all that, we probably would have done a whole bunch of research and analysis and all that kind of stuff. But we ended up speaking to another I would say another millennial, to a millennial, right? And I was like, "How do you start a podcast?" He's, "Oh, just do this, get software, get your phone, and that's what you do." So it was like, "Okay, Eric, let's just go with it. Like, let's not overthink this. Next Monday, let's meet at the office, and we're going to record this, and we're just going to start." Right? And then, like you said, that first episode, those first couple episodes were, I mean, they were interesting. They were interesting, right? They were interesting, but it was our thing. Who was grading us? We were having fun doing it. At first, I mean, we were just constantly. We found ourselves just looking for different guests each week, and so it would just be people in our network. And every week, Eric would say, "Ted, do you got somebody? Do you got somebody?" I'm like, "What about this person?" You're like, "Well, didn't we do that person last month?" "Yeah, but I'm running out of people." Right? and then it got to the point that there was the pandemic, right? And then we went to doing it, instead of being in the office together, we started doing it virtually with StreamYard, and now we just have guests that are constantly coming to us that we would have never, like, we didn't know these people. Like, we have just people out here in in the UK or someplace that have reached out and want to be a part of this, and it all started with us just kind of stepping out there, right? Not overthinking it, and then being able to, provide, some great content. And then we've had some, we've been out here doing it some time and have been recognized for putting together some great content. And again, it was just, we just didn't overthink it. So I think, just sometimes just, kind of jump out there. And I feel that we can do that now with with the platforms that are available to us today, right? We're in charge of production, right? And we go out there and we say, this is what we're going to do or how we're going to do it, and we just jump out there and do it. And there's an audience for that, for the rawness of it. So yeah.
Write that down. Absolutely. Yeah, we sometimes it's easy to overcomplicate it. I was like, Gresham, what are you gonna say?
No, I said twiggable.
That's
that was Teddable.
Oh,
Terrible.
A little different, Teddable.
Oh man, no, definitely write that down. So my contribution to this segment, it goes back to when Gresham was saying, "Hey, you know what? Um, I really didn't like my first episode of. Now I'm on episode number 1600, and I can relate to that because I remember like when we first started, I thought I sounded pretty good. I thought I was pretty articulate, and then I'll go back every now and then and listen to those first couple of episodes, and I cringe. I'm like, oh, yeah, like that wasn't as good as I thought it was. But you know what I think though? I think it's a compliment. Like it would be worse if if you do 1600 episodes and you go back to episode one and you're like, oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, I sound the same. That would be worse because that means
Yeah.
you're not making progress,
Right.
right? I think what you're noticing is the growth. And that's why, and it's something I always say, you can never allow perfect to become the enemy of progress.
Mm.
So the fact that, and I know if you're watching me and listening, you can relate to what Gresham and I are talking about and Ted are talking about, where you maybe you did a podcast and you've been doing it for a while, and you go back and you listen to the first two or three, and you are horrified. That's not a bad thing. That means you're making progress.
Is that? God, that's you. That's you. That would be us.
Yeah. So I think take that as a sign of progress. And that's really the goal, is just to continue to make progress, get better. And Gresham had the quote from earlier about running your own race, right? The only competition you have is yesterday's version of yourself. So write that down. Yeah. This has been an awesome episode. Gresham, thank you for everything you've shared. I know that people are just chomping at the bit to work with you and get more information from you. So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Eric and Ted. And yeah, I have a site, imgresh.com, imgresh.com, that has links to the podcast, the digital marketing company, the franchise business, just a lot of different things that can help support people. So anything you're looking for, you can find links to it there.
imgresh.com. And definitely make sure and so if they want to listen to the I Am CEO podcast, they go there as well.
You can go there, or you can go directly to imceo.co. It's also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube Music. They're calling it now. So anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find it there.
Fantastic. Well, again, Gresham Harkless Jr., thank you for sharing what you shared. And speaking of sharing, for those of you listening and watching, don't forget to share the show.
Share the show. Share the show.
Sharing is caring.
Share it. Exactly, Gresham. Exactly. Sharing is caring. Don't forget that. Make sure you share this. And don't forget, you can actually listen to this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button. That way you'll never miss a future episode. That's our time for this week on the 30 Minute Hour podcast. Until next time, have a great one.